Hi, welcome to the podcast that is still yet to be named. Today, I am here with Glenn, the ex-finance guy turned entrepreneur building an AI-first organization, and Matt, a proudly failed entrepreneur and a recovering consultant. I myself am a currently struggling entrepreneur and a founder of Wombat, which is an AI company. So today, what we would like to discuss is what are the product features suddenly possible with AI and what does that mean?
Yeah, I'll dive in there, Lizzie, because I suggested this as the topic. So I'll explain a little bit about what we mean by that. There's a lot of AI applications that are being built out there now that are very specifically AI and using a lot of the key technologies that are in AI things, which are slightly more obvious. What we're talking about here is the potential for other features in normal apps that are now made easy and nearly trivial with AI that were not, they could have been possible before, but they would have been super hard to do and they probably wouldn't have been that good. Whereas now AI opens up possibilities of making very simple features that are very effective and quite remarkable. So what's my example of that? So I am developing, it is an AI-based product. It's an AI version of MyFitnessPal, trying to make it as easy as possible to record a food diary, basically. So instead of having to write and select lots of things in from a database, a very manually a load of effort way to do it, we just take a picture, AI recognizes the food items, estimates nutrition, super simple. You can make some tweaks if you need to, but in general, the AI does a very good job of that. So that's the background of the app that I'm building. So, but one of the things around that was we also have some virtual coaches that will help you improve your diet. So we're trying to get people to improve their health, have better blood sugar balancing, better nutrition, better gut health, all these different, more slightly esoteric factors. So it's not just a simplistic view of food, it's a very holistic view. And therefore, we're trying to get people to be healthier in general. I mentioned we were trying to help people with diabetes and things like that. And she goes, that would be great. My gran would love this because she's got type 2 diabetes and this would be really good. But she is Afro-Caribbean and she only eats Afro-Caribbean food. So this isn't going to work for her. You're suggesting things that she just wouldn't eat. And I went, well, I had a thought about it for a little bit and I went, hold on a second, we can do that. With AI, that feature now becomes easy. So to understand what I mean by that, you have to take a step back and say, what in the old days, what would we do to try to do that feature? So with engineering or product hat on, what would we need to do in the background to try to figure out is what's a good recommendation to achieve this aim, but just using a pantry of Afro-Caribbean food and recipes. And that will be hard. We need to build up know what the objective were, and then build up this whole range of foods that are specifically defined as Afro-Caribbean, then figure out what recipes might suit that, and then figure out what types of those foods would overlap with the objective that we're trying to achieve, blood sugar balancing in this case for someone with diabetes. And
2 years of building a data set before you can start building an application.
You know what? I quickly, probably as a product manager, throw out that feature request. Just go, there's no way I would even think about doing that. But actually, move across to the world post AI and that, we go, oh yeah, we can do exactly that. Let's just add another string into our prompt that we're putting in the back of the app that's going out to the bigger large language models and say, restrict your advice to Afro-Caribbean food. And just, let's see what it does. We tried it. It was like, oh my God, that works really well. and it was, and because it knows, these things know what Afro-Caribbean food is, and they implicitly understand it. Not only that, they know all the recipes, they also know what blood sugar balancing is. It just knows, and they can actually mate those things together. And it's not even the case where it gets it wrong some of the time. It just generally gets it right because that's quite a well-defined task, and it knows what to do with that. And that was something that made me think differently from how I was thinking about what AI can do. That, okay, that's a very different way to think about creating new features in this world when we have this new sets of tools. And actually, Matthew, you mentioned you had some interesting points around what might happen when that doesn't happen, though.
Yeah, it's fascinating because you really can just build things rather than having to spend 2 years building that data set. You just use the fact that all of the relevant data is already inside these models, right? And they provide a data recall mechanism that was unimaginable like a year or two ago. And I think the one thing I mentioned before when we were preparing this was the question that raises for us is, in the old world, you would have to build that data set. You would put huge amounts of effort into making it as good as you could make it. And then you would build deterministic software that would give the same result every time, but would probably end up being really quite unsatisfying. Not a great experience, and would lack flexibility. And with the tools we've got available to us now, we can build something that is what you're talking about, sounds very satisfying, that fits the actual needs of individuals rather than being designed for a specific subset of individual tastes and personalities. But the price of that is that we have to accept some indeterminacy in those features, that sometimes it's going to say something a bit mad, and sometimes it's going to get it wrong, although increasingly less it seems as we go along. The example that came to mind when you were talking about it was an application that was shown Meetup in Amsterdam, probably this time last year, which the idea of which was to support people who don't have perfect Dutch, either because of education failures or because they're not natively Dutch, who receive letters from the tax office here or the government or the council, all of which write in very impenetrable legalistic Dutch. And the idea was, when you get a letter, you can scan the letter, it would translate it into your language or into simplified Dutch and tell you what you needed to do, which is incredibly valuable. But of course, the app didn't get released because it was making mistakes. And arguably, I don't even think arguably, that would have been a really good thing for those people to have. Frankly, it would be good for me. I don't speak native Dutch by any stretch of the imagination. The benefits to society of just releasing it, accepting the occasional mistakes and taking the power that it offers is huge, really valuable.
I guess that's the trade-off, right? You get a lot of AI unlocks, but at the same time, we have to have this mental shift away from things being totally perfect to deploy. We have to accept these imperfections to start moving forward. At least for me, with the product design background that I came from, there was this insistence on having everything pixel perfect before anything ever goes live. And I feel like now, this just really isn't how apps should be developed in a world of AI. I think that now it's more about throwing things at the wall, whether they are not perfect, whether they hallucinate, in an acceptable state, and testing it out before you invest further.
But you had a good example of an application integration you mentioned.
Yeah, when we were speaking before, I mentioned that Super Chat, which is the super connector between WhatsApp and Meta and everybody, had been announcing that they are launching this thing of, oh, AI is going to be connected so that you can connect your WhatsApp with an AI super easily. It's coming. And I just didn't want to wait for that. So then I just decided, okay, I'm not a coder, I'm not a developer. What I'm going to do is actually just go to Make and Zapier and make a Frankenstein monster out of this using their API and plug it all in, and it worked. So I went back to them and I was like, guys, well, look, I've made it. And they were just completely flabbergasted. I was on a phone call with the top guys there, and they were like, how did you make this? How does this fit together? How have you done this? And I feel like it's put the power back into individuals' hands. You don't have to wait for these giants to slowly lumber and develop something anymore. Now you can actually do it yourself, especially with no coding tools like Cursor and Replit.
It's a spreadsheet, but spreadsheets became platform, especially when you automated tasks with Visual Basic that's sat behind it. And when the whole finance industry runs on Excel still, it's pretty scary, but that's what happens. And it's a big thing. And that is because individuals were given the power to build spreadsheets run reports, do analysis using those things, and give tools to help run businesses. And lots of businesses are run off the back of a spreadsheet. That's still a very common statement. And people go, we know we have an AI system, a SaaS application to take care of that. It does a better job, especially when it communicates to other systems, etc. But we're now beginning to see the ability for individuals not just to hack together something that's pretty ugly and unsustainable in a spreadsheet. The next generation of that was then no-code tools that came along and let people begin to knock together things quickly and easily, just as a back-end systems, etc. I was doing that for years because I had API access to various systems and worked with in a semi-technical sort of way. I would probably be the best way to describe it. But in reality, the whole no-code movement, I think, is all of a sudden being taken over and flattened by the whole build an app from scratch movement, which is pretty interesting to see how this industry that was just suddenly beginning to emerge all of a sudden get overtaken by a new industry that came out of left field. It has begun to manifest with tools like Replit and Bolt and Cursor and Lovable. Bolt and Replit and Lovable are all similar sort of things. Have an idea for an app, type it into a chat, and things begin to happen. And we saw that demonstration even just last week. They came out from Mistral and they're the chat tool, which all of a sudden has built a calculator and just people were editing and adding features real time. And it was like pretty cool. It was producing new output very fast. It was very impressive. So I think these things are pretty bad. Let's be very clear. A lot of people look at that, they check it out, and they go, hold on a second, what are you talking about? This is nonsense, because these things obviously cannot replace X or Y or Z. I think what people are missing completely there is, hold on a second, this is magical. 6 months ago, this was impossible without coders. Now we can even do something like this, which is a big step. It's not that good, but this is what disruptive innovation looks like. It's never very good when it first comes out. It goes back to Clayton Christensen and the Innovator's Dilemma. All these new tools are always bad, but and they're nowhere near as good as what a developer can do, etc. But this is the theory of innovation and disruption. They will provide a use case for a certain group. And this time, in this group, it is people who want to build an app and have an idea and just quickly try something. And generally, that group's a lot bigger than the group that currently builds apps and there's coders. So therefore, any small business owner that needs a specific thing, all of a sudden this becomes a lot more possible. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that through 2025. I'm really excited where we end this year at. I think it's going to be pretty startling, to be honest. And we already are seeing some big companies go from inception to like tens of millions of revenue in months now in this space. And we're going to see a unicorn very quickly happen here. And I think that's a slightly more technical tool for developers to automate their tasks. But these layers sits nearly on top of that is also definitely going to see a lot of innovation as well.
You mentioned small business there. Startups, small businesses, individuals have got the advantage here, because going back to what we were talking about before, they've got the space to make mistakes. Whereas, again, the big enterprise is going to get in its own way by not allowing permissionless innovation and slowing things down with process and various gatekeepers. I guess the question for any organization is how to let yourself take advantage of this, right? How to let yourself just get on and build. Just think of individuals going back to what you said before about Excel, right? People like Excel because if they can get hold of a data source, they can do something with it. And in the enterprise, these tools are Excel times 10. But in the enterprise, you're still going to be locked off from the API. You're still going to be locked off from the data. Whereas in the outside world, you're not. I think one of the other things we talked about prior to this was Google's Gemini models. I mean, Glenn, do you want to say what you were saying about Gemini? Because I think it leads into a good example of that kind of problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were initially using all of OpenAI models and some of the work we were doing in production. So these are the most capable things. This created this possibility of doing some of the things that we wanted to do. So we quickly used those and we were innovating in that quite a lot. And then along came some of the Google models at a really remarkable price point about 6 months ago. And we were like, wow, that seems very cheap. It was very early doors. We had a couple of things we needed to do, look at them straight away. But a few months later, we began to look at them again and said, this really could change our cost base for what it is we're going to do, change the service we can offer. Actually, it was such a big drop in cost that actually it changed our business model. There's not many things that do that in startup environment, even startup environments. Here's a new technology. It's such a difference that will change the complete economics of this as a service for us. So that was quite interesting. And then we suddenly realized the capability as these models began to improve and they got faster. We've seen that generally across all large language models. The inference speed, actually how many tokens per second they produce, how fast they can talk, if you like, has gone up a lot over the last year. And also alongside that, the costs have come down. So I think those two things are related. So therefore the companies can offer it cheaper and things like that. I think those are all self-reinforcing virtuous cycles, which is good. Good for everyone, basically, good for humanity, I genuinely believe at this juncture. And we're seeing coming through.
Sorry, that was good, but not so good for Google yet.
Not so good for Google yet.
You were saying, like, A, nobody's really paying attention to them, and B, they're doing a terrible job of integrating it into their product. I think there's definitely, as you said, these big organizations, there's different teams doing different jobs. I think there's the Gmail team, there's the Google Cloud team, there's the Firebase team. They've actually been reaching out to me and saying, what does this mean? And I'm working with them in giving them some feedback on some of the products, actually. And I said, this doesn't make sense to me. You're lobbing words together and it just don't make sense. And because you know what this means, the combination of these two words, what does that actually mean? And there's a few things like that. There's a little bit of the left hand and the right hand definitely don't know what's going on with those things. But let's be clear though, the guys in Google DeepMind that are producing the Gemini suite of models are doing a remarkable job as one of the top AI labs. And I think most people have been ignoring that slightly. And I think this new range of models, the Gemini 2.0 series that have just come out, remarkable. I think they outperform a lot of the models out there. They're absolutely at the top table of models, and they're actually at a cost point that's a lot less than a lot of other ones. Google are really trying to be, if you want to build an application using these technologies, Google want to be the company you do it with. And I've been pretty impressed with how they've gone about some of those jobs at the moment. It's almost like they've never really recovered from that too early launch and the terrible keynote where it went wrong and this, that, and the other. But the other problem is, even if they have solved the model building and the model release, you look at the way Gemini is integrated into Gmail at the moment, and it's useless.
That's an application layer problem. How does the Gmail team use Gemini to make its product better, right? That goes back to our product issues that we have. Now, Google should be able to do that well. They have all the data. They have all the pipelines. They know all the technology stack in the background. Someone very focused could do a very good job there for Google if they empowered someone to do that. And actually taking a bigger step back from that and going back to what you said about its organizational structure and how that works. I think one of the good examples of how big companies can innovate like that is Amazon, actually. So Amazon famously have speed as a habit, and they really talk about letting people go out there and make decisions really quickly and not wait for committees, or as we see in politics a little bit now, let's have a consultation or an inquiry into XYZ, which basically means we're not going to hear anything about this for 5 years. We can't afford to let that happen with these technologies, because I think if you're not responding to some of these new entrants and responding to some of these new technologies, a lot of companies are going to get overtaken by them. There's going to be new entrants come in that are AI first and solving the problem in a better way in many cases, but also a more cost-efficient way. And traditional companies, if they're not innovating or really begin to transform themselves, are going to struggle. And I think we're going to see quite a bit of that, I think.
Yeah, Liz, you were talking about your team and how you're dealing with that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So just working with the Memrise team, just the complete shift away from the traditional ways of working, like the traditional product development flow, and trying to integrate now, like using these AI tools like Bolt and Replit and Cursor, like a completely different paradigm and a completely different way of working what we can do is we can put the power of AI into the hands of like product managers or designers or people who don't have that kind of coding mentality, and literally just get them to speak to life applications that they want to test. And it's a great example of Memrise, because Memrise is really focusing on driving this AI initiative for the company. And essentially what they've been doing is tearing a hole in their application and being like, look, if you can dream it and you can build it, let's test it so that you can actually get empirical data from people about an idea that you have, rather than investing lots and lots of time in development costs and then designers doing pixel perfect work so that it can be built in the correct way. Sometimes it doesn't have to be super perfect, but you just need to get validation of an idea. And now just teaching the guys at Memrise how to use Replit and how to kind of just deploy rapidly and test these ideas quickly has just been a complete game changer for us. And really, it just raises the question nowadays, what does it mean to build an application? It's not what it used to be, especially when you can, yeah, exactly, speak to life, anything that you really want to build nowadays.
I think there's a danger in that at the moment of where the tools are. I think as complexity begins to ramp up, if the foundations aren't good, it begins to not be going to be able to become a production feature. Yeah, it needs to go back. It needs to then go to engineering. I think it's only a matter of time though before the building blocks are correct for that sort of stuff. And you're going to be able to dream up that feature. It's going to be able to look at your code base, your engineering principles, all this sort of stuff. And that feature will be, I love your term, spoken to life. And yeah, we thought about it. We asked for it. The machine then asked us back some clarifying questions in what it needed to do. And whoa, the feature just happened. I've seen that happen in a few things that have, it is jaw dropping when it actually happens. And you get something that potentially is semi complex and would have taken you weeks to do happen in 5 minutes. And you're like, whoa, that is insane. And I'm still, that does happen has happened to me, I think, in the last 6 weeks since Cursor released their YOLO agent, that I would at least every few days I've had one of those sort of experiences, which has blown me away. And I really am quite optimistic and excited about what's going to happen when you just empower people to do this sort of stuff.
I worked for a company called EMC for many years. And we sometimes joke that EMC stood for Excel Managed Company. And you got to wonder if tools like Cursor get into the wild in enterprises, a company's going to be like Cursor managed companies, right? Because yeah, I can just build an app now, not just a spreadsheet. I can build something that's really useful for me and this little part of a giant organization. It could be so much more powerful than Excel, and maybe even more dangerous in a good way.
Again, we're seeing that stuff. My son's at university at the moment. He had an idea that he was playing with. He's studying physics, but he's got a hobby, and he said, I need to build this into a little model. I'm going to put it into a spreadsheet, etc. And I said, hey, I tell you what, that's pretty good. I think a lot of other people might be interested in that as well. Let's build it into an app, and we'll put a spreadsheet up. Let's try to launch it, right? Seriously, I think we can do that in a night. Let's try that. And he actually went away himself and built a pretty good working prototype. It's a bit rough around the edges because, okay, the basis that we've agreed to catch up tomorrow night and see, can we turn this from a zero start with just some ideas then into now a fully rewritten and functioning app in a night? And is that possible? I think yes, actually, which is pretty interesting in these things.
I think as well, like just from like I was chatting with one of the guys at Memrise, and he was showing me a Miro board that was showing me all of the user feedback that they've ever had. What are the current features? How are they implemented? What do they want to change? What is, what is going to get more return on investment for building? And I was like, wow, this is a hell of a lot for one person to hold in their brain and make decisions on. All of this context is way too much for one person to make a decision on, but this is a perfect application for AI to take all that data and crunch it down in something that's digestible and like referenceable, to be like, the reason why we're doing this is because of these logical threads.
Yeah. And the interesting bit of that goes back to what those Gemini models brought to the table. One of the features that absolutely was unique to Gemini is Google have mastered the long context window much better than other people. And they're well ahead. So these latest models from OpenAI have 128,000 token context windows. Google have up to 2 million basically now, which really changes what you can do. So that's nearly 20x, 15, 20x more tokens that you can, data that you can put into the question, if you like. So that's a perfect example there, Lizzie, in terms of here's all this context, here's all this stuff, right? We're doing stuff now that's really interesting. That was like, we're like, wow, that's produced a really good result, a really personalized result, because we just lobbed loads of data at it. We talk about how this is working in medicine, and when you work with medical data, it's super, super sensitive. And the gatekeepers and the people that are figuring out and trying to think about some problems and solutions in that space, rightfully so, medical data needs to be kept very private. But really, the risk of that is going to hold back innovation in the rest of the system, and actually could actually be holding back very positive outcomes. And in this particular case, people's lives are at risk. So we go, okay, data privacy, it's an important issue. It's one of the big factors, but people's lives are at risk. What is the right amount of risk to be taken in some of these situations? Medicine's generally, you're a surgeon, you need to make, should I do this operation or not? Like, you're literally weighing up some very hard choices right there, and you're taking risks. And I think a lot of some of these big organizations don't think about risk in the right way and some of those sort of things. How can we move quickly in as controlled a way as possible, but be willing to take a little bit of risk here and there? Some of these large context windows, if we just gave some of these tools all that data, they would be seeing things that a doctor with a 10-minute appointment would miss. And there's no question about that. We're going to see some evidence that points towards that now. It's going to be quite interesting. I don't want to be one of those people who just bring all technology in just for the sake of it. But if you really think about this and you understand what these things can do, we're nearly doing something that is bad for people at the moment by not using these tools. And I don't think that is fully appreciated yet. We're at the cutting edge of this stuff. But I think as we begin to progress, having these AIs have all this data, making benevolent decisions for people, that's going to become a very powerful place to be, and a very good place to be for a lot of people. A lot of good outcomes are going to come from that, I think. And there's some risk to it, but there's actually everyone's focusing on the risk as opposed to what is an amazing set of positive outcomes that can come from that. Let's not do all of that good stuff because we're worried about this one thing. Or do we take a wee bit of that risk and then try to achieve some of these potentially very positive outcomes for people?
Absolutely. I guess all of it is just staking all of the potential progress that you can make with these AIs, burning them at the stake of it has to be perfect and it has to be completely exactly in line with regulations and stuff. It can stifle a lot of that innovation, and that's certainly coming. So I know that we're completely out of time now, but thank you very much for coming and chatting. It's been really lovely, and there's plenty of stuff that we could have dove into, but yeah, but just delved
into.
Oh gosh, yeah. Oh, English literature degree, terrible. Cool. Anyway, thank you very much, and yeah, until the next one.
Thank you, Lizzie.
Thanks, Lizzie.
No worries.